Good. Test. Can you hear me okay back there? All right, well, good evening, everybody. It's a few minutes after, so we'll go ahead and get started. I am filling in for Barry tonight and happy for the opportunity to hopefully help lead a discussion as we continue to study this workbook that Barry had put together, a topical study of the book of Proverbs. And this is a topical study of Proverbs chapters 10 through 31. And tonight we've made it to page 30, which is the good and the bad of the tongue. And this is a big subject, and there's a lot to consider. I don't know that anyone is immune to the challenges of controlling our tongue and trying to help others do so as well, as I believe we'll see tonight. Tonight we're going to be looking at basically two sections here. The first being the destructive nature of our speech. And the back half tonight will be the benefits, the productive aspects of our tongue in contrast to the destructive nature of our speech. As you see in the beginning paragraph here in the introduction, as we're all familiar with James 3, in that famous section, we see how powerful the tongue is, how it's such a small part of our body, yet has such great control of our lives, control of our future, and our salvation, and the salvation of others. And we'll see, I think, tonight over and again that we just can't underestimate the ripple effect of our speech. And we don't know, only God knows how far our words will truly be carried. James says the tongue is a small flame, but yet it can set a whole forest afire. And then mentioned here is Jesus, of course, in Matthew chapter 12, when Jesus says there that by our words we will be justified, and by our words we will be condemned. So it's actually a matter of our own salvation. Our words will either justify us or condemn us. So there is an eternal perspective to keep in mind with everything that comes out of our mouths. And obviously from Matthew chapter 12, just a few verses prior, Jesus said, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So this is absolutely a problem of the heart, or an issue of the heart. So before we dive in tonight, if you'd like to join me in a word of prayer. Most holy God, our Father in heaven, hallowed be thy name. We're so thankful for this evening. We're so thankful for this day, for the sunshine and the rain. So thankful for the opportunity that we have to gather together at this place as a group of believers in you, a group of believers in Jesus, your Son, our King. We pray, Lord, that you would deliver your wisdom and impart your wisdom into our hearts tonight. Give us an ear to hear and a soft heart to receive your word as it is given. And it's in Jesus' high and holy name that we pray. Amen. Okay, the first verse here, Proverbs chapter 18, verses 6 through 8. Proverbs chapter 18, verses 6 through 8. The booklets is the New King James Version. My Bible I have here is an ESV. So a lot of different interpretations of these verses, but the gist is the same, I believe. But feel free to make your observation on your translation as we go tonight. The New King James says, "A fool's lips enter into contention, and his mouth calls for blows. A fool's mouth is his destruction, and his lips are the snare of his soul. The words of a talebearer are like tasty trifles, and they go down into the inmost body. Okay, what are your observations? What do you gather from these few verses here in Proverbs 18? What's the downfall of the fool? His mouth. Absolutely. You had it right, Miss Kay. You got it. And his mouth is doing what? Well, it's getting him into trouble. What does this say? Entering into contention. His mouth is calling for blows. Contention there, strife, contention, fighting. What sort of tension exists here between the fool and the world? Is it in his own mind or with other people? Yes, ma'am.
I saw a progression of contention, blows, like physical fighting, destruction, and then a snare ultimately to his death, because a snare tightens until death. So I thought that was interesting, and you see this progression of destruction. I don't really understand your question about his relationship with the world, other than that.
Yeah, so just mean, and it could have been a really bad question, and I'm the first to admit. But just saying that this is relational tension. This is the fool interacting with other people. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and strength. The second is like to it, love your neighbor as yourself. So much of our spiritual lives has to do with our interaction with the world and with other people. Yes, sir.
I think those first two sentences, entering into contention, calling for blows, I picture someone, I imagine we've all been in contact with someone like this, that almost no matter what you say, they take the opposite viewpoint. For whatever reason, their default is to just disagree.
Right.
And it's just causing contention. It's foolish. You're just trying to fight.
Yeah. It's just part of their nature. It's part of their disposition. And as you mentioned, that is a foolish thing. His mouth calls for blows. Do y'all have any thoughts on that section there? Yes, ma'am.
I think kind of a little bit what Jerry was saying is that sometimes a fool will just keep talking when he sees that someone's getting frustrated with him to the point of all that person must do is just punch him in the nose, because he just will not stop talking. He won't stop, and the stuff that he's saying could be very inflammatory, very even to the point of maybe being lies or whatever. But he keeps talking. The person that he's talking to gets more and more frustrated with the world or whatever, and literally the only way to
Yeah, and so maybe I hope this is not a license to wallop somebody against the head, but it's certainly their disposition would seem to call for that, and that reminded me of Proverbs 17:10. A rebuke goes deeper into a man of understanding than 100 blows into a fool. So, to the contrast, a wise person, you can mention something lovingly to them and they think about it the rest of their lives and they change their course of action. Whereas a fool, you could physically beat them all day long or give them blows of rebuke, but their heart is not, it's a hardened heart, and it's a heart problem, and they're not willing to receive the rebuke, and the blows that you might give them are going to take no effect, because that's just how hard-hearted they are. It seems that the fool obviously is not humble, and that they have a tough time, if ever, realizing a sense of the weight of their own sin. So, what about the words of a talebearer are like tasty trifles, and they go down into the inmost body. What do y'all think about that verse? Yes, sir.
The net version says the words of gossip are like choice morsels. That sounds more intriguing. Like when you hear the juicy gossip, you know, it's like it almost causes you to think differently about someone or something, even if you know it's just words, it's just gossip, it looks terrible for you.
That's right. That's right.
It still feels really good.
It's easy to listen to, or it can be. It's like candy. But yet, as you mentioned, it goes down into our hearts, and it shapes how we view other people. So we've got to be awfully careful of that. Any other thoughts, comments? Some of these same themes are going to kind of build as we go here. So, yes, sir.
I'd say a talebearer secretly carries stories of their own idea about something from another person. They take it from person to person, maybe with some truth in what they're saying. But the secrets are not really fit to be told, or they're basis and misrepresentations. And they put false colors on it. And I guess in some cases they're told with design to hurt people's reputation. Maybe not intentionally, but it does. But to break their friendship.
Right.
That's one way this happens.
Yes, sir. Yeah, the words of fools, as we've studied in Proverbs 1-9, that's a path of destruction. It's a path that grows darker and darker, and we need to be careful of what we listen to, because the gossip may not be true. It very well may not be true, probably isn't true. And as David mentioned too, we don't need to let that shape our opinion of other people or the world, because it's just that. It's just garbage gossip, and is evil, really, with evil intent. Moving on, Proverbs chapter 20 and verse 19. He who goes about as a talebearer reveals secrets. Therefore, do not associate with one who flatters with his lips. Who is the message for in this verse? The hearer. That's right, the hearer. So, and it's a message for the listener to do what?
Don't kill me when you listen.
That's right, to stay away. As we've talked about so many times in Proverbs classes this year, we need to not be so naive as to think that these people don't exist, because they do. But what is it going to take, knowing that? What are we going to need in order to not associate with talebearers? If that makes sense, and it may not. What sort of skill is it going to require of us in order to be able to tell if someone is a talebearer or not?
In one sense, it's, I guess, discerning if something that's being shared with you is personal. Right away, God has some red flags that either it's untrue and doesn't deserve an audience, or if it's true, maybe it should be kept secret. Two things come into play, at least, that I can think of offhand.
Yeah, I was thinking discernment. We've got to be able to discern truth from folly. Hebrews 5, we have to practice that, continual practice to train our powers of discernment. Even though it may be easy to listen to, we've got to be able to spot it out and to act on that and to not associate with those people. And then a talebearer, as you mentioned, they are revealing secrets. So This is obviously not a trustworthy person. And that is, anybody have any thoughts on that? The talebearer revealing secrets, breaking trust with other people? David?
Something like Christy said earlier, in my version, says, do not associate with somebody who's always opening his mouth. And it's kind of that idea of if you're willing to tell secrets to you about other people, what do you think you're willing to tell other people about you?
That's right. That's right.
Keep their mouth shut.
That's right. Yeah. They'll just go to the next person and you'll be the subject of conversation with them. So instructive that we need to be able to keep a secret and to keep things said to us in confidence. Jerry?
As you talk about discernment, I feel like gossip and flattery can be similar in that they're two things that you can say the same thing and it either be to be helpful or gossip, or it can be false flattery, or it can be actual, I'm trying to build something up. Like what your intent is matters so much in those things.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Discerning what the people are doing or whatnot.
That's a great point. Any other thoughts, comments on this verse here before we move on?
One thing here should be noted, we shouldn't guess other people's thoughts and intents. They're telling us if the truth, because it's really false what they're saying. It's not the person we're talking about.
That's right. Yeah, you can't tell someone's the motive of their heart. Only them and the Lord can. So there's an element of that for sure. Proverbs 26, verses 20 through 22. Where there is no wood, the fire goes out. And where there is no talebearer, strife ceases. As charcoal is to burning coals and wood to fire, so is a contentious man to kindle strife. The words of a talebearer are like tasty trifles, and they go down into the inmost body. What does this tell you about the nature of a fool and his role in gossip?
Absolutely necessary. Without him, gossip, there would be no gossip.
That's right.
There would be no strife.
That's right. Yeah, where there is no wood, the fire goes out. And the parallel then with wood would be what? What's the comparison here?
There's no fuel for the gossiper to gossip. They can't say it. So if you're not telling them stuff, if you're not confiding in someone that you know is a gossip, you're not giving them fuel for the fire, then they're not going to be able to say anything. So they're not going to be able to say anything. And then also the same thing with where there's no talebearer, just like exactly like Mara said, there's strife. There's nobody that's talking about stuff like that. There's no strife. So if you're talking about fuel on specifically on that about no wood, the fire goes out. There's no fuel. The coal is to burning coals. Charcoal is to burning coals, and wood to fire. So if there's nothing to keep that going, it's not going to be spreading.
That's right. So there's already, if you liken the wood to the talebearer and the fire to strife, it would seem that there's already maybe a spark, but if you don't add wood to it, then it goes away. And again, the words of a talebearer are like tasty trifles, and they go into the inmost body. Any other translations there for verse 22 that you might have? May not be that vastly different. I saw one version that was saying basically it's as though waging battle, the words of a talebearer, and so we are wounded. The words of a talebearer are as wounds. Again, just this damaging, destructive nature of foolish speech. And again, as David had mentioned, going in the inmost inner part of our body, there's no way that this is not going to affect how we view other people and how we view different situations. If you remember back to Proverbs chapter 4, when we studied about keeping our heart with all vigilance. And I always think of that idea of a spring house and our heart being the source of that spring, and our job is to protect that spring, because whatever goes in is eventually going to come out. And if we allow these delicious, tasty trifles to go into our hearts, well, our stream is going to be polluted, and the words that come out of our mouth are going to be negatively affected by that. And to the point of fueling a bad situation, our role is, as Romans 12 has said, is to live peaceably with all people. So if there's going to be a problem, don't let it be us. That's what we're called to be. Proverbs chapter 10 and verse 19. Proverbs 10:19. In the multitude of words, sin is not lacking, but he who restrains his lips is wise. Okay, what are your observations there?
The more you say, the more it's likely you're going to mess it up.
That's right. That's right. The more you say, the more it's likely that you're going to say something that you regret or that you just shouldn't be saying. Reminded me of back in Proverbs chapter 6 of putting up surety for your neighbor, and then you're getting caught in the snare of your lips, speaking without thinking, and you're saying things that you shouldn't without giving thought first. James chapter 1. James chapter 1 and verse 26 says, if anyone thinks he is religious and does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his heart, this person's religion is worthless. So James is rather plain speaking about babble and not having this self-control in bridling our tongue. So that is a sobering thought. Your religion is worthless if you don't have that ability to control your speech. Any other thoughts or comments there? If not, we can move on. We've got several verses to go here. Proverbs 16, 27, and 28. An ungodly man digs up evil, and it is on his lips like a burning fire. A perverse man sows strife, and a whisperer separates the best of friends. What does this tell you about an ungodly person and what's going on in their heart?
It would seem like whatever news the person in this position has isn't enough. They're looking for more. They're actually motivated to dig deeper and find something even worse.
That's right. That's right. They are continually looking to dig and stir up trouble. Their lips are like a burning or scorching fire. It seemed like the idea was it's almost an itching on your lips. You can't help but say it. You're just going to relinquish that burning sensation. You're sowing strife, as opposed to Ephesians 4, when we are called to bring peace and this unity of peace with one another. A whisperer separates the best of friends. So rather than bringing together peace and unity, the path of folly is destructive and burning everything to the ground along its way. Saw the word ungodly there, and it seemed that it had its root in Deuteronomy 13, speaking of people that were trying to persuade Israelites to turn back and go and worship other gods. And it seemed that the literal translation here was that it is a man of Belial. Does anybody have any comments on what Belial means? I had to look that one up. That wasn't one that I think about every day. It's another word for Satan. It's another word for Satan. It's used in 2 Corinthians 6. So literally, an ungodly person here is a worthless person that we've talked about in Proverbs chapters 1 through 9. And it is someone who is literally a son of Satan, because Satan is ripping people apart. That's what he is trying to do. He is separating. And to contrast, the path of the wise, godly person is to bring unity amongst the brothers. Proverbs chapter 26:27, whoever digs a pit will fall into it, and he who rolls a stone will have it roll back. Does this remind you of any Bible verses, Bible stories? He who digs a pit will fall into it, or just any observation in general that you might have? What's that? Yeah, absolutely. It reminded me of Daniel. King Darius's counselors wanted to throw Daniel into the lion's den. Well, guess what? They ended up in the lion's den themselves. He who rolls a stone will have it roll back on him. So we see, as we know, with wisdom and folly, and in life, there are consequences to our actions. And so there is a recoil of justice that will occur. And is that always going to happen when we want it to? Or is that always going to happen in this life? Obviously not. But justice will come, and, it could be hard sometimes to see different people doing different things in the world, and I demand justice be done. Well, that's not really what the Bible teaches. There may be a time and place for that, but ultimately justice will be served, and it will be God doing the judging on His time. Proverbs 17, verse 14, the beginning of strife is like releasing water. Therefore, stop contention before a quarrel starts. What's the wisdom here? What's the instruction here?
Get together and talk about it early in the process.
Catch it early in the process, Brother Chip?
Because they never know where it's going to go.
That's right.
Just like water, it's going to, well, I'm familiar with the statement of that, I don't know who said it, but the path of, the description, the path of water and lazy individuals is the path of least resistance. And water's that way. It will find its way into places you never would have thought.
That's right.
And that's the way contention is. It will find its way to places you never could have imagined.
Absolutely. And so the wisdom here and the instruction would be to have the prudence, to be able to see, hey, this could get really bad, and I'm going to stop it right now, whereas the fool doesn't have prudence and lacks that understanding of the consequences to come. So, how much trouble in the world could be avoided if everyone just understood this. Okay. We can go ahead and move on. If nobody has any other comments they'd like to bring up, we can move on to the benefits now. We've seen the destructive aspects of our speech, but there's a flip side to that, and there are enormous benefits to our speech as well, or it can be. Proverbs chapter 10, verse 20. The tongue of the righteous is choice silver. The heart of the wicked is worth little. Okay, so what's the parallel here in this verse? What's the comparison?
The small heart of a righteous person is worth so much, while the wicked's whole being is worth so little. Even the smallest member of the righteous is valuable, whereas the whole being of the wicked is worthless.
Yeah. That's absolutely true. And, it's also, we have tongue and heart paralleled. And as we've mentioned, the tongue and what we say comes from our heart. So the tongue of the righteous is choice silver because the heart of the righteous is precious and has truth, godly wisdom to speak, whereas the heart of the wicked is worth nothing. So it's a problem of the heart. What is it about the tongue of a righteous person that would make it valuable or productive? Why is the tongue of the righteous choice silver?
Speak love and wisdom.
That's right. Speak love, wisdom. The tongue of a righteous person can reprove and rebuke in a loving way when needed to. And as we've talked about, we don't know the ripple effect of that. And so the tongue of the righteous, as we'll see later on, it has the opportunity to provide salvation not only for ourselves, but for other people as well. By your words you will be justified. But the heart of the wicked will not receive that reproof that's coming from the tongue of the righteous. Proverbs chapter 10, verse 31 and 32. The mouth of the righteous brings forth wisdom, but the perverse tongue will be cut out. The lips of the righteous know what is acceptable, but the mouth of the wicked what is perverse. Okay. What is the picture, what kind of picture is given here? Does anybody have a different interpretation for brings forth wisdom in their Bibles? Or have any thoughts of what that might mean in comparison to being cut out?
I think it's just saying what they teach, what they say is wisdom. It's the Word of God, wisdom, and we define it that way. So if they're righteous, they're going to speak of righteous things. They're going to influence people in a righteous way.
That's right. That's right. From what I could gather, my take on it is that this was a picture of trees, plants. The mouth of the righteous bears fruit. It is budding. It is always, wisdom begets wisdom. That's part of the nature of wisdom itself. There's not a fixed pie of wisdom. Someone that has wisdom is ever increasing in wisdom and has wisdom to share all day for everyone. They'll never run out. And we'll see that again later on here if we get to it. Whereas the perverse tongue will be cut out. Reminding me, the axe is laid to the root of the tree. So the mouth of the righteous bears fruit. The tree of folly does not bear fruit, and therefore it is not going to stand in judgment. Yes, ma'am.
This reminds me, this in the last verse as well, reminds me in Matthew 12, talking about Jesus talking about how a tree is known by its fruit. He says, either make the tree good and its fruit good, or make the tree bad and its fruit bad. For the tree is known by its fruit. You wrote it, Bibles. How can you speak good when you are evil? For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks.
That's right. That's right. And that's dead on with the point here. The lips of the righteous know what is acceptable, but the mouth of the wicked what is perverse. So the wise knowing how to speak in a way that is fitting and is pleasing to God and to man, whereas the fool is just the opposite. I'd like to keep going just for sake of time. Proverbs 11:9. Proverbs 11:9. The hypocrite with his mouth destroys his neighbor, but through knowledge the righteous will be delivered. Okay, what's the comparison here? What words are compared?
Seems to be delivered or destroyed, being in one. The words of one will cause the destruction of individuals. The words of another, the righteous, will cause people to be saved, rescued. Whatever word you want to use.
Absolutely. In so many different ways. So the hypocrite being compared to the righteous. Again, foolish speech destroys even those who may be close to him. But through knowledge, the righteous, and through the wisdom of God, the protective nature of wisdom, which we saw all through Proverbs 1-9, will deliver the righteous. A couple verses later, verses 11 through 13 of chapter 11, by the blessing of the upright, the city is exalted, but it is overthrown by the mouth of the wicked. He who is devoid of wisdom despises his neighbor, but a man of understanding holds his peace. A talebearer reveals secrets, but he who is of a faithful spirit conceals a matter. And Brother Chip mentioned this deliverance of the righteous, and that could look like many things. What are your thoughts on by the blessing of the upright a city is exalted? What might that mean versus a city being overthrown by the mouth of the wicked?
To me, it means that when people talk in constructive ways, it builds the community up. It affects the whole community. In a congregational sense, it affects the whole congregation. It's building itself up through the encouragement of its members. Whereas the same can be true of a divisive tone. Corinth is a good example of people who were divided and were pitting themselves against each other, comparing themselves to each other on such empty bases. And what was happening to that church? It was not glorifying God. It was being destroyed by the way that people were treating each other. So the contrast in my mind is that people binding together and saying the righteous things can build up and make a full community profitable.
Absolutely. That's very well said. I was thinking of Abraham in Genesis 18 when he interceded for Sodom and pleaded to God, God, don't destroy it. What if he found 50 righteous people there? And how many times in the Bible have we seen the sincere prayers, so speech, righteous speech, blessing a literal city, saving a literal city from destruction, or at least trying to. So, warning here against rash words. Think before we speak, and to realize the power of our words, and to realize the power of our prayers, and the wise counsel that we can give others in our lives that can help build up our community and our city. He who is devoid of wisdom despises his neighbor, but a man of understanding holds his peace. And again, a talebearer reveals secrets, but he who is of a faithful spirit conceals a matter. So we need to be able to be trusted. We can certainly trust God. He has proven that time again throughout history. And so we need to be able to respond with being trustworthy ourselves. Proverbs 15:12, a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. The tongue of the wise uses knowledge rightly, but the mouth of fools pours forth foolishness. What are your thoughts? And that's actually Proverbs 15. It's supposed to be verse 1 and 2 in this booklet. It says verse 12, but it's verses 1 and 2. Sorry about that. Proverbs 15, 1 and 2. Any thoughts there? A soft answer turns away wrath. Yes, ma'am.
We've been talking about the sheer number of words, but this comes out that it's not just in the number of words, but in the way you say them, and also when you speak, pouring out versus knowing when to say things is wisdom.
Absolutely. Jerry?
I think one of the hardest things to do in a conversation is to not yell at someone who's yelling at you. And this is saying you couldn't help the situation. You wouldn't be escalating.
So being able to have gracefully and tactfully speak the truth in love, a way that would speak in a way that would promote peace rather than add logs to the fire, so to speak. The mouth of fools is just drinking out of a fire hose. They 90 to nothing, don't know when to stop. Proverbs 15:4, a wholesome tongue is a tree of life, but perverseness in it breaks the spirit. Does anybody have another translation for wholesome? A wholesome tongue? Gentle. Healing. It seemed that idea of healing was what it was more literally to be translated as. So this idea of soothing, rooted in a healing tongue, is a tree of life. Why would the wise, wholesome tongue be compared to a tree of life?
Tree of life is used in a lot of places in the Bible, Revelation, Genesis, throughout. Just means that God's grace and love and power.
Absolutely, yeah. The tree of life is a picture from Genesis to Revelation, and the tree of life is life-giving, and life-giving forever. It never ends. And so our words, if we're careful and speak the truth, can have the same effect. It can have beneficial effects of us forever. It could be our salvation, the salvation of others. It can actually be a tree of life if we choose to be careful to what we say. Thank you all for your comments tonight, and Lord willing, we'll be back next Wednesday, and Barry will pick up there.
It's good to see all those out with us tonight. We are going to start with a song, and then we'll have Michael bring us an invitation. Our first song will be number 583, Holy to the Lord. Holy, 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 holy. Cleansed and reconciled, holy. Washed from sin so high, holy. Living undefiled, oh Father.
a minute. Matthew chapter 13. Language is a fascinating thing to think about. There's hundreds of languages across this world. The words that go in and out of fashion, slang words, words that mean something different in different circumstances, how they change meaning. Tonight I want to talk about, just for a minute, a word in particular that's a fairly new English word. And by that I mean it's been around for about 100 years, but compared to the whole English language, it's not a very long time. And that word is priorities. Priorities. The singular form of the word, so I guess priority, that's been around a lot longer, but priorities has only been around for about 100 years or so. And you might ask why that is. Why do we think that is? Well, let's take a look quickly at the definition of the word priority. I didn't like any of the Merriam-Webster versions, so I found one on vocabulary.com. I don't know how legitimate that is, but I really like this definition. Priority, the concern, interest, or desire that comes before all others. I'll say that one more time. The concern, interest, or desire that comes before all others. It's that idea that there is one item that comes prior to any other item, one singular item that is your one priority. So we can begin to see why the word priorities hasn't been around very long, because if you define it that way, it doesn't make sense to have multiple priorities, right? You can't have many things that come before the one thing. In a race, there are not two gold medals for the top two places, right? There's just one gold medal. So why do I mention this? Is this just a semantics thing? Get everybody to stop saying priorities? No. Does it matter to think about that perspective? Well, consider the implications of getting our priorities straight instead of just getting our priorities straight. Think about your list of priorities. I might say, let's say 5 for me. You're just God, family, others, career, health. That could be in different order than that. Definitely depends on the day, right? But what we tend to do with a list like that is we compartmentalize our priorities. We have X amount of hours in the day, and as long as I give God the most amount of time, and then my family the next most, and then others, and then my career, and then health, I have my priorities straight. Is that what God wants from us? To have the most time out of competing interests? Is that what he's called us to? Let's take a look at Matthew 13, these two parables about the kingdom of heaven, starting in verse 44 of Matthew 13. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and covered up. Then in his joy, he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls, who upon finding one pearl of great value, went and sold all that he had and bought it. God wants to be and is worthy of being our one priority, who we treasure above all things. He wants to be present in all aspects of our life. If we compartmentalize instead, there are just areas of our life that we're leaving God out of. If we have priorities where God is not part of them, then we're leaving God out of those parts of our lives. I can't have a Christian hat and then a family hat and then a career hat. I am not a Christian, and also separately, I'm a husband. I'm a Christian husband. I'm not a Christian and also separately an engineer. I'm a Christian engineer. Treat God and his kingdom like the pearl and like the treasure. Make him supersede all things in every aspect of our lives. Let's seriously consider in each of our lives who our one priority is. I love the phrase, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. Please think about that this week with me as as we go throughout the rest of the week, that it's not about giving God the most amount of time. It is about giving God everything in every aspect of our lives. If you need anything tonight, if you want to make any adjustments, you can make them right there in your seat, or you can come forward as we stand and as we sing this song.